In today's lesson, we are going to be looking at making graphs with Google Sheets. Now, you may already know how to do this, or it might be relatively straightforward, but we're just going to go through a couple of examples, a couple different graphs using Google Sheets. So again, this might just be a refresher, or again, you might already know, but it doesn't hurt to kind of have this these instructions as a backup, just in case you do get stuck. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to recreate the table that we see here in Google Sheets. You're going to then, so I've already done that for you. You can find it in the content section. So we have our data here. We have the cell phone brand and the number of students. So what we're going to do now is we're going to select all the cells. So we're going to highlight them all. We're going to click the Insert tab and go down to Chart. Now, usually Google Sheets is pretty good at making the appropriate graph, but right now we're just going to see, okay, so what type of graph did it make? So it decided to make a pie chart. Again, nothing wrong with this. A pie chart does work. We're looking at the different percentages each company has out of all the students, or the students as a whole. Now, again, we could change this if we wanted to. Maybe we'd rather have this as a bar graph. Right? Maybe we'd want to see the number of students compared. Again, let me move this a bit. Move over here. So again, in the setup option, you can just click on the different chart type. It will give you one automatically, and then you can adjust it. You can adjust the titles by double clicking on the different spots. So here we go, might change it to cell phone brands. You do have the option you see on the side when you under customize of all the different things that you can customize. The style, the border, the color, looking at the pie chart, right? Add in a donut hole there if we wanted to, just to make it more unique. Again, looking at the different slices, so we could look at the different slices, change the colors, and so on. Right? Maybe if you want to focus on one in particular piece. Again, you can kind of go through and take a look and customize some of it if you wanted to. Changing the chart titles or the axes. Again, any subtitles we may want to throw in there, as well as a legend. So again, all relatively interesting things to kind of customize it with, make it your own. If you don't see that chart editor option, you can see it by clicking on your chart and clicking on the three dots in the top right corner. And then go to Edit Chart. And there you have your setup, which as long as you've highlighted the correct data, you shouldn't have to adjust, but you go over to Customize and there are all the options. So that is our first one, looking at our pie chart. I'll move this over again. We'll keep it in the middle, I guess, because we have on the bottom our next example. So our next example, we are looking at the number of students in senior math classes over the last 2 years. So again, we've entered this data, or I've entered this data already. You can find this in your course content, and then changing the sheet on the bottom. It's all in the same file. We have our data entered here. So what we're going to do, again, is we're going to highlight our data. We're going to go Insert, Chart. Google Sheets is going to do its work and come up with a chart on its own. Right, so again, it automatically assumes or kind of does the best chart or graph based on how you've entered the data. So if you're not getting this graph, chances are you've probably entered the data differently. If that's the case, you can always go to chart type and go through and select the different ones. So again, bar or pie chart doesn't quite work too much. Maybe a double line graph, but again, it doesn't really help when we're comparing groups. Maybe a kind of horizontal bar graph or bar chart or a column chart. So again, different things you can do. If you do find that sometimes the data doesn't quite work, you might be adjusting some of these things over here on the side in terms of setup. So series is just kind of like what the different data sets that you're looking at. So you can see the title, 2020, 2021 enrollment. So that's the first column, second column, and so on. X-axis is looking at the course. So the series technically represents the y-axis. So the 2021 or 2020, 2021, this column shows the y values, so 12, 58, and so on. You can change it to stacking if you want, so it kind of shows both of them on top, one on top of each other. Still the same values, but again, different ways to show it. Again, you can obviously go to the customize option like we talked about on the previous graph and go through, and again, you can play around with this and adjust your formats or your titles or whatnot. Again, so this is our double bar graph or our clustered column, so we get to compare values across categories. So the categories are the 2 years of enrollment, looking at specific courses. The next one we're going to go to, in example 3, we are going to go down to height. So we're looking at a third example. So here we have all of our height data. So quite an extensive amount of data, about 100 pieces of information. So you don't have to type this out. It's already there for you in the course content. And same idea. So you're going to select all of the cells. If you're only using one column, what you can do is you can just click the A at the top and that will tell us to highlight the entire column. The same thing would work if you're going horizontally, but we want the vertical column of height. Insert chart, and we see that now we've created a histogram. Again, the histogram is due to the fact that we're looking at values that are measured, or basically there's an infinite possible range or continuous data. Because if I was to measure someone's height, it's not a fixed amount, right? It can vary depending on how accurate your measuring device is, right? You can measure someone's height down to the centimeter, millimeter, micrometer, nanometer, down to the atom if you really, really wanted to. So again, we've created our histogram. So there are a couple things that we can do, right? We can change the title. So in our example, it says change it to heights of students or of high school students. So again, we can double click there, or we can do it in the customize option on the side. Oops, closed it. So I'm going to click on the double or the triple dots, go back to customize. What we can also do, if we go under histogram, we can change the bucket size. And what the bucket size means is bucket size is referring to the intervals. So we see our intervals here are going up by 15. I can change that if I want to maybe 10. So I get a different looking graph. I could change it to 5 if I really wanted to, maybe even 2 or 1. So we can see that by changing the bucket size, it changes the shape of my graph roughly. Oops, I lost it. I'd say at about 10 or even the 15 that was done through auto, we get a good kind of view of how the heights are distributed. Even at 5, we kind of see it, but it's a little bit more jagged. 1 obviously is all over the place. And if we were to jump up to 25 or even 50, we don't get a good sense. So normally speaking, what we would want to have for our bucket size, if we would want to have roughly 10 bars. Now that's not an interval of 10. It would mean 10 specific intervals. So here from 100 to 115 is 1. 115 to 130 is 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So right now we have 10 intervals here with a space or a range of 15. This would be a good amount. If we wanted to go down to 10, that would also work as well. Again, we kind of get a good sense, or we have a decent number of intervals. We can also go down to our horizontal axis. We can start our minimum value of where we want our graph to start. So we can start it at 130 and have a maximum value of 210. So this is looking specifically at our range of data, our highest value and our lowest value. So again, depending on what your data is and what you want to show, if you only want to show specifically your data, you can go under the horizontal axis and adjust that. You wouldn't really do it for the vertical axis because it automatically does that based on the number of values that fall within each interval. And again, you can kind of play around with it and adjust it. If anything happens, you can always go undo, and that will basically take away all your adjustments or changes, and so on. Moving on to the last example. So example number 4, which is the tuition tab on the bottom. You can see my cursor. So we click over to the tuition tab. So now we're looking at the tuition over the number of years. So again, we've entered the data. We're going to go to insert. We are going to go to chart. It is going to create again what it thinks is best, which in this case is a line graph or a line chart. And this is good because again, we've talked about a line graph showing the change over time, or that's what data it's representing, which we can see here. We can easily see the change in tuition over the years. Again, under the customize option, if we go to titles, we can change our titles to, let's see, it says history of university tuition in Ontario. Again, it updates it. We can go under and look at the vertical axis. What are we going to change here? Under the grid lines, we see, changing the minimum, minimum to 5,000 and maximum to, 9,000. So again, just, I closed it. So you can see it's a little bit temperamental, but again, you can always quickly go back. What we've done is we've now adjusted our vertical axis to kind of remove the empty space to get a good view of our graph by adjusting the minimum and maximum for the vertical axis. In this one, we wouldn't adjust the horizontal axis because again, it's already filled with the data that we have. We wouldn't want to remove one of the years. You can also then go under grid lines and ticks, select the vertical axis under the drop box. So looking at vertical or horizontal, we want to look at the vertical axis. We can change the major spacing or the major step to 500. Maybe we change it to step 500. So again, we can see what it's going up by. So the major step are the large grid lines. The minor steps would be the smaller ones where we don't see the values for. So again, you can adjust that, play around with it as well. You can show the tick marks on the sides if you really want to, even the minor ones. So again, just more things that you can do and customize. So I do recommend that you try to play around with this to get an idea of what you can do with your graph. So there we've kind of adjusted, made it look a little bit nicer, made it a little bit clearer on the axes. But again, play around with these customization options, change the colors, see what all the things do, see what adding a legend does. And so on, things like that, just to get more comfortable with using Google Sheets and creating graphs. But again, it's relatively straightforward because Google does automatically create the most appropriate graph. You may have to adjust it slightly and then again, put your own twist on it by customizing it.